One of the Eastern religions is Buddhism. Buddhism has a founder. There was a human being who invented or discovered Buddhism. The inventor or discoverer, the founder, is the Buddha, Siddhartha. Siddhartha is a real person's name, and after his life's journey, became one of practicing and preaching what's later called Buddhism. He gets called the Buddha. But the Buddha just means the awakened one, and if you were to be awakened, then you would be called Buddha as well. The historic Buddha is Siddhartha, who has a legendary life. Historians aren't quite sure which part is true and which part is not true, but let me tell you the story in brief. He was the son of a king, and as a prince, he was not allowed to see any of the suffering and pain of the real world. For the first 29 years of his life, Siddhartha did not see pain or suffering, or at least that's what legend tells us. But he goes out into the world and he sees the 4 signs, which spark in him something like a seeking of how to end or avoid suffering. Those 4 signs he saw was a dead man, a sick man, and a aged man, meaning an old man, and a meditating man. So imagine someone who looks enlightened. Those 4 signs spark within him the desire to understand what ends suffering. And he begins his preaching. Eventually, he gives us these 2 main ideas. One is called the 4 Noble Truths. And the end of the 4 Noble Truths, the 4th Noble Truth, ends up leading us to the Eightfold Path to Enlightenment. So let's look at the 4 Noble Truths, and then let's look at the Eightfold Path to Enlightenment. The 4 Noble Truths, according to Siddhartha, are that life is suffering, and that your craving something causes the suffering. And if you were to end craving, then you would end suffering. And a path exists which could lead to the end of craving, aka lead to the end of suffering. So the 4th Noble Truth takes us to the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is all about how to do something well. And it tells you the 8 main things that you have to do correctly. These are right view or right understanding, right thought or being selfless, right speech or being honest, never lying, right action or doing things that bring about peace, right livelihood, like avoiding things that would do harm, right effort, like causing only peace, right mindfulness, like being aware so that you could know that you're doing the right thing, and right concentration, which would be what allows you to do all the other things, including reaching some kind of trance state or nirvana, which we'll get into soon. Just to give you a story that would make some of this come to life, if you were to make your living, your livelihood, let's say your career, off of selling bombs or guns, that is not right livelihood, because your livelihood, your income, would be from being a part of something which causes harm and not causes peace. So right livelihood means even something about your job. You better not have a job that would increase all of the harm in the world. So we have the 4 Noble Truths, that life is suffering and your craving things creates suffering. And if you were to stop all this craving and striving and wanting and longing, then you would end suffering. And if you follow the Eightfold Path, you will reach a peaceful place. Where will you end up? You'll end up in nirvana. Nirvana is the state that is your goal. It is the freedom from suffering. Nirvana is a feeling and a state of mind which is possible for human beings to experience while they are alive. So if you were to cool down this fire lit under you that makes you want things, and you were to instead stop being selfish and start being selfless, then you are going to reach nirvana, and that's how you know you've done it. A symbol of Buddhism is this wheel, and it's the wheel of teaching. The wheel represents change. The 8 spokes represent the Eightfold Path, and the rim represents the endless cycle of rebirth. Buddhists believe in reincarnation. So there's this spiritual thing that outlasts your death. Now, it's not you. There is no self that will go on. You do not go to heaven. You do not go to hell. You do not live another life after this one. There is no permanent self. There is no permanent soul. But Buddhists do believe in karma. And so what comes after this does depend on what you have done in the present. And you could break the cycle of rebirth and rebirth and rebirth by reaching an ultimate stage of nirvana where you are no longer reborn. And that's also represented in this wheel of teaching, which is one of the oldest symbols of Buddhism. So this part's really important. Why do you suffer in life? It's because human beings are insisting on things being permanent, whereas in nature is change, and change is natural, and there is nothing which is forever or eternal or permanent. So you're suffering because nature is not permanent and you want it to be. But who you are will change, what you want will change, what you have will change, your family will change, everything changes. Nothing is forever. And this is something you need to accept. And were you to accept nature in itself, then you accept that there is no you forever. And these things you have are not permanent and they're not yours. This acceptance makes you be more selfless. And you stop being greedy. You stop wanting and wanting and wanting because you know it's not yours and it's not going to last. And instead, you become generous. And you give and you give and you give so that you're spreading all of the good stuff. And that's what you should do. You should spread good stuff. So in one of the sacred texts, there is a very important line, something that you can just automatically adopt into your life. The sacred text I'll read to you from is the Dhammapada, and I hope I'm saying that right. It says that our life is shaped by our mind, that we become what we think. Suffering follows evil thought as the wheels of a cart follow the oxen that draw it. Our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. Joy follows a pure thought like a shadow that never leaves it. So Buddhists want you to take your life and your future and your karma in your own hands. Have good thoughts. Have the right concentration, the right mindfulness, the right thought, the right intention, the right effort, the right livelihood. Have all of these things go well, and you will minimize and minimize and minimize and minimize suffering. So there's simple do nots. Do not lie, cheat, steal, kill. Do not drink alcohol or commit sexual immorality. Do not be luxurious. It's a life of simplicity. Do not overdo anything, and do not underdo anything. So there's this famous story about how Siddhartha was meditating and not eating, and he abstained from everything. And at some points, he was even only eating one single grain of rice every day, until finally he realized that turning away from all of the resources is not good, just like giving in to all of the resources is not good. So he gives us the middle path, a middle path of balance in between two extremes. Lastly, I'll leave you with this thought. You might have heard or seen images of the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama is something like the Pope to Catholics, but to Buddhists, not to every Buddhist, but to Tibetan Buddhists. To a Tibetan Buddhist, the Dalai Lama is the ocean of wisdom. It's the chief head of the Buddhist church or temple or monastery.